Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Turrett, writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1994 Native Reservation drama titled Dance Me Outside. Now, Dance Me Outside runs for 1 hour and 24 minutes long. It is directed by Bruce McDonald. It is produced by Bruce McDonald, Brian Dennis, and Duke Redbird. Okay, the script was written by Bruce McDonald, John Frizzle, and Dan McKellar, and it is based off of the novel by W.P. Kinsella. The score was done by Mikhail Dana and Keith Sakola, and during the whole run of this movie, his famous song Indian Cars is heard throughout most of the movie. If you're a fan of this song, I'm sure you'll enjoy this even more because it's played throughout the course of this movie. Alright, the cinematography was done by Miroslav Basak, and the editing was done by Michael Pasik. And the stars of the movie are Ryan Black, Adam Beach, Lisa LaCroix, Michael Greyeyes, Kevin Hicks, Hugh Dillon, Jennifer Podemski, Sandrine Holt, Rosemary Trudeau, Vincent Andre Manitowabi, and Tamara Podemski. So, okay, in 1996, Canadian Governor General, or back then the Canadian Governor General Romeo LeBlanc, declared June 21st to be National Aboriginal Day. It is definitely a pivotal time to honor and cherish the diversity and the unique culture and the amazing strides Native, Inuit, and Métis people have accomplished throughout Canadian history. Now, even though the impossible hurdles that Native people had to overcome in order to survive in Canada, which stands true as we speak, one thing's for sure, they were here first, and forever we will stay. The significance of this holiday as a contributor to the progressive stages of redress and reconciliation, which means bringing unity between Native and non-Native people and sharing our culture, language, and customs to generate a feeling of identification, and that our traditional ways are still practiced to this day, even though we're living in a more modernized structure. We still do not let our old traditions die. In terms of movies, there are several that reflect on Native people, be it period pieces, situations dealing on a more modernized setting, and just a general way of life so that viewers can get a better understanding of how we live, how we adapt, and how we communicate is always a very, very important commodity that we must all sort of get together so that people could know us better. But the one movie that really tugs at my heartstrings is this 1994 movie directed by Bruce McDonald, based off of a novel by W.P. Kinsella titled Dance Me Outside. The plot of the story goes like this. The focal central plot of Dance Me Outside is around two late adolescent boys named Silas Crow, played by Ryan Black, and his buddy Frank Fencepost, played by Adam Beach, who realize that their procrastinating ways must come to a stop if they wish to fulfill their dreams to get into a mechanic school. Now, in order for them to enroll in the mechanic school, one of their assignments is to write a piece regarding what inspires them the most. I mean, it might sound easy and all, but there's quite a lot to think about, and they just need some sort of some sort of muse to sort of inspire them so that they can write a well pieced together paper so that they could get enrolled into this mechanic school. So one weekend, Silas's sister, Ilianna, played by LaCroix, she returns home from Toronto, and she also has, she went to some university in Toronto. She's got her law degree, and she also is in a relationship with a fellow lawyer who's a non-native. His name is Robert McVie, played by Kevin Hicks. So she returns home, she's greeted by the family members. And even though they're all proud of her accomplishments, they all seem to take a liking to Robert. But her mother doesn't really care about all that. All she wants is grandchildren, which we'll probably extrapolate further on. So aside from Ilianna returning home, Silas and Frank are eventually reunited with another close associate of them. So at the local dance hall called the Blue Quill, Silas, Frank, and Ilianna are approached by Ilianna's ex-boyfriend, who's also a reformed ex-convict, who goes simply by the name of the Gooch, played by Michael Greyeyes, who wants to, reconcile any kind of ill differences between him and Ilianna. But she politely brushes him off, saying that, she's moved forward and that he should move forward too. So not everything is right on the Kita Benesi Reserve, as a local non-native miscreant who goes by the name of Clarence Gaskell, played by Hugh Dillon, who this was actually his acting debut. Hugh Dillon was famous for being the lead vocalist and the bass player of a Canadian punk rock group known as the Headstones. And this Clarence Gaskell is a thug, a punk, and he also lives in a nearby town, and he always seems to somewhat walk onto the reservation being racist, bigoted, and being just an all-around troublemaker. So at the Blue Quill, he leaves the dance with a teenage girl who goes by the name of Little Margaret Wolfchild, played by Tamara Podemski. She is the younger sister of Margaret Wolfchild. She's played by Jennifer Podemski. There's Jennifer Podemski as Margaret Wolfchild, and then there's Tamara Podemski as Little Margaret Wolfchild. Let's try to see if we can get that in. There's a reason why she's called Little Margaret, but I will get to that in a bit. Little Margaret, of course, she tries to dance with some of the people at the Blue Quill. She tries to get Coyote, but Coyote is too occupied with his readings and doesn't really and isn't really like into dancing. But however, Clarence seems to be somewhat quite inviting. So, you know, he and Margaret start dancing at this Blue Quill Tavern. And of course, you know, like what happens in almost every movie. I mean, this is like some kind of fucking cliche here. And I'm not just saying about this, I'm not just applying to this movie, but almost like every movie that I watch, almost every movie that takes place in a bar, they're either raiding by throwing bottles and cans at people. There's always fights that seem to somewhat break out. And there's just all kinds of fucking chaos that just seems to erupt everywhere. Why is it that in every movie they always, in bars, in every movie, there always has to be fights? Why can't we just have a movie that takes place in a bar or a tavern that doesn't have anybody fighting or a war breaking out? And this is exactly what happens in this movie. Oh, anyhow, yeah. So Clarence and little Margaret finish their dance. Clarence takes little Margaret home. The only bad news is little Margaret doesn't come home the next day. So by the next morning, Silas, Frank, and I forget Jennifer Podemski's character's name. I'm really sorry. It's been a while since I've seen this movie. I mean, this movie came out in 1994, you know. I don't always remember everything that happened 25 years ago. Being that I was a teenager myself back then. That's right, folks. I am old. Anyhow, so the next morning, Silas and his friends walk through a tunnel. And remember what I said about little Margaret not coming home the next day? Well, she's not going to be coming home any other day because her dead body was found underneath the tunnel. Now, listen, I know I might have just dropped a one-liner, but just because I dropped a one-liner doesn't necessarily mean that I was being sardonic or sarcastic or anything like that, or trying to take light of a situation. But yes, little Margaret's dead body was found, and we all know who did it. You can't hide from the truth, Gaskell. Yes, Clarence Gaskell murdered little Margaret Wolfchild. Now, remember what I said about why is she called Little Margaret? Well, apparently little Margaret comes from a large family. And I guess one of her older sisters is named Margaret. So I guess that means because they already had a Margaret, I guess they had no choice but to just call her Little Margaret. Makes sense. There's a whole bunch of mishmash of issues that was faced within this movie. The script involves definitely the conflict of marrying out and a murder, which was definitely handled with great care and great consideration by Bruce McDonald, who not only directed, he also co-produced, he also wrote the script. Oh, he had his fingerprints in a lot of things in this movie. The script was also, like I said, co-written by McDonald along with Don McKellar and John Frizzle. And it was definitely based on a series of short stories by the late W.P. Kinsella. So back to the whole marriage problem. Okay, yes, she is marrying a non-native lawyer. Okay, he's not the antagonist here. He's actually a pretty down-to-earth individual. But however, though, Ilianna can't produce the babies that her mother expects, because unfortunately his sperm count is quite meager, much to the chagrin of LaCroix, played by Rosemary Trudeau. So due to a pathetic, and so in probably one of the more humorous scenes, yes, this movie may have a lot of political upheaval. There is some humor in this movie. So what Silas, Frank, and the rest of their friends do to this guy, this Robert, is they make some kind of a mock sweat lodge for this Robert McVeigh by making him an honorary native. You know, all the rituals, all the initiatives, and all that. Even though this was all just a mock, they practically they had him drunk. They kind of, you know, in some humorous terms, fuck up his brains just so that the Gooch can have intercourse with Ilianna. Because, hey, even though McVeigh's sperm count is quite limited, the Gooch, well, he has all the juices in that area. So that LaCroix could finally have her grandchildren. So that's kind of where the light humor comes into this movie. But this movie is also, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of really, really dark territory. Aside from the murder of little Margaret Wolfchild, the social injustices in the Canadian penal system really gets their dose of angersome revenge. Not in the physical sense, but in a more addressing way. Due to the pathetic loophole in the criminal system in Canada, this murderous bastard, Clarence Gaskell, was given a light prison sentence, while the Gooch did something less heinous, and he was like in jail for like a substantial period of time. Clarence Gaskell kills an innocent teenage girl, and then he gets out of jail in less than a month. What kind of fucking social injustice is that? Why didn't you just send him to his room without supper for a week? He gets a light sentence, and yet he murdered somebody in their cold blood. And yet he only gets a light sentence. That is fucking intolerable. I'm sorry to say. I mean, I don't really like to lash out my anger here, but he was given a light sentence. Well, the Gooch, okay, yes, he committed a misdemeanor, and maybe he did deserve some prison sentence, but what he did was light compared to actual cold-blooded murder that Clarence Gaskell committed. I know this is a movie. I know this is a work of fiction and all, but the social injustices really speak out, and it's delivered in a hand-fisted way. So much so that this stirs oil into the fire as a political rights activist who goes by the name of Hobart Thunder, played by Vincent Andre Manitowabi. He speaks out about the social injustices implemented by the Canadian penal system. And you know what? During that whole speech, he does speak the truth. Many people can actually almost like literally get away with murder, or they get lighter jail terms, while others, they commit a less heinous crime and they're in jail for like a year or two. Okay, listen, I'm not sugarcoating the Gooch here. He is not exactly what you would describe as a role model. But what he did was less heinous. I think what he did was, I don't remember what he did. I think he was in a drunk driving incident. But because he was Native, he was served a longer jail sentence. While Gaskell, who murdered somebody in their cold blood, was given a shorter jail sentence. Totally uncalled for. So what did Silas, Frank, and the Gooch do? Well, if the Canadian penal system won't do shit, I guess that means one thing and one thing only. The gloves come off. That's right, folks. The old eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Which I don't condone, no. But if the Canadian penal system won't do this guy justice, then I guess justice would have to be taken personally. And it's not going to be pretty either. So this definitely like puts a wedge between Silas as he's caught at a midway point, as he's faced with the murder of a Native girl and his sister married to a non-Native man. But still, in an act of comedy, we see Silas persuade Gooch to get his sister pregnant. But the extreme drama stems from Silas cooking revenge against a fiend who got away too easy. And, one of the things about this movie that I liked is that, in spite of the many failed directing efforts, I would have to say, I would have to give a praise out. This is not a rant. This is not a rant to the movie. This is not a rant to the performers here. I think they all did a very, very fine job. Director Bruce McDonald definitely has made a movie that was definitely worth watching, that was both insightful and important. It helps that, he was accompanied by a strict executive producer, Norman Jewison. And, let's face it, if you have Norman Jewison on board as an executive producer, by God, this movie will go up a few points higher. Following Kinsella's story with care, even though it's based on a short story, making it into a full motion picture is quite the milestone there. And this is, it has a coming of age story, which is saturated with scintillating substance. This is truly one of Bruce McDonald's best films in his career. And, I got to give hats off to him. And no, I wasn't actually, like lambasting the actors or the performances. I mean, if they could get an angry, yelling reaction from me, then that really does mean that the actors and the performers did their jobs, and they did their jobs well. And I wasn't actually mad particularly at them, but it's just, you know, like the political systems and the penal systems in Canada, the judicial systems in Canada definitely does need work. And we actually need to have them build much more stronger care and consideration for Native people so that we can live in our reserves safe and sound without fear. And, you know, I'm not turning anybody down. I'm not saying anything bad about anyone. I love each and every one of you guys. And if people are coming on here to listen to me, you know, thank you for your support. It's always really greatly appreciated. And like I said, this movie was handled with great care. It helps reflect upon the issues that we deal with in our modern day life. And I think it did a world of justice. You know, one of the things too about this movie that I forgot to also mention, the movie Dance Me Outside actually did launch into a spin-off a couple of years later. Several of the characters reprised their roles. I think there was a different actor who played Frank Friend's Post because, you know, Adam Beach, you know, he went on to more bigger mainstream stuff. But this movie did launch his career, and you know, seeing him in his performance, you know, goes to show this young kid actually had a lot of great potential. They all did, you know. Hats off to each and every one of them for doing a remarkable job. Like I said, you had a good combination of extreme political issues, but there's also some light issues in comedy, drama, and some coming of age as well. It was a mishmash of everything in there that will definitely please a lot. If I was to give this score out of 10, I would definitely give Dance Me Outside an 8.5. I think people should really watch this movie due to the insightfulness and the importance. And I think this movie hits it right where it counts. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and don't be rude. And I'll be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.